She would go from the Pentagon and the Vice President's office to the Times to do a byline story on the front page on the latest information that she had got, presumably from her secret sources. And of course, she was being fed administration propaganda. All of this came out. Then, on top of that, we have another thing that the press has done nothing about. They do not inform us because they have their own political interests and economic interests. I've never met Congressman John Conyers, but we talk on the telephone. He's a brilliant man. He is the minority head of the Judiciary Committee of the House. Like everyone else, he had figured out that the election in Ohio had been stolen. So he went out with some staffers and several other congressmen. We have the book right here. I wrote the preface for it. And it has done quite well with Amazon on the internet. I would have thought that when twice in a row a presidential election has been stolen, and most people know it, and the media will not touch it, that the republic is gone. And the New York Times would not review the book. Oh, let's move on, they say. Yeah, move on. Where to? Guantanamo? The shame of the press is beyond anything that I've seen. And by press, I mean television and 20th century rabid fox and so on. It is a bad, bad time. On the other hand, we see resistance begins, although it isn't covered. I spoke the famous February when they had the demonstrations against going to war. I spoke to 100,000 people in Hollywood Boulevard. Tough thing to do, since by and large they all want to be rock singers, and it's hard to keep them still. But there they were, marching as one. And the same thing was happening all across the country. And recently, we've had quite a bit of turnout. People are asking questions. An interesting one in New York City, I made a kind of speech, demagogic speech for PBS, is that a public radio? And guess what, the largest group to show up were high school students. This was the first time they've checked in. Somehow or other, it has really penetrated to them. They don't have newspapers to read that will tell them anything they want to know. The television is just, an electronic zoo, at least on Sundays. And suddenly a whole new generation just appeared. I wasn't there, but I was told by people who were that they'd never seen that happen. So where the middle generation, or the baby boomers, or whatever we want to call various generations, let this happen, and there may be new people now. I thought, rather than having me drone on, why don't you all talk to, ask questions. I'll try to answer. Yes.
I have a question. If you could pick one person to run this country, who would you pick?
Are we able to repeat the question?
If I could pick one person to run this country, whom would I pick? Probably a Swiss hotel corporation. Nothing works now. Everything is falling apart, and including the climate. And you could just trust the Swiss to be neat and make sure the bedpans are empty. I'm not ambitious. I just simply want it to work. Housekeeping, yes. One person, no.
Question.
Yes.
Would you pick just one person to run the country?
Well, I do not incline toward tyranny. One of my objections to what we've got now. which is essentially a tyrannous government ruling by decree, not informing us of what they're doing, why they're doing it. But then, you know, we've got into that habit with Vietnam. We could never explain to anyone what we were doing there. At least we're going to build democracy, something, you know, we never bothered with, because the founding fathers didn't like democracy. You should read in the Federalist Papers the attacks on Athens. They just thought Athens was a disaster. And they didn't want all those people shouting at each other and disagreeing. In a free country, I'm trying to do my Eisenhower imitation. I think I've lost it. But in a free country, there is no place for a serious difference of opinion on great issues. That is patriarchal tribal lore. And we have to live with that. No, I hate to be hung up on Switzerland, but they do have a wonderful rotating presidency. The ruling party or parties have a general cabinet, which is like one of our cabinets, in charge of foreign affairs, agriculture, and so on. But then they rotate the presidency year by year. Nobody gets to be president for more than a year. Oh, what a relief, and how cheap it must be. Just to get that silly little thing over to Camp David, you know, that's very expensive. And the trips everywhere, you know, spreading joy.
Over here.
Yes.
I wonder how you account for the rise in recent decades of religiousness around the world. When I became intellectually aware in the 40s and 50s, it seemed like secularism was on the way, but it's reversed itself in the last several decades.
What was the question?
I'll repeat it. How do I... He was saying in the 40s and 50s, secularism was in the saddle and religion was in the little church on Main Street in Elm. And it kept out of public affairs, as it is supposed to do. The rise of it, there's two reasons. One was the absolute sweep of television in the 50s across the country. It was in every household. And people watched and watched and watched. The other was that the evangelicals got their hands on it, particularly in the South. And, you know, you just put your hand on that TV set now. You concentrate, and the good Lord will cure you those piles. You will absolutely be dancing again joyously and praising the Lord for all of this, and send me $500. And Congress helped out. Religion is tax exempt. It's okay if they can raise money, but we should tax it. We tax everybody else's money. So they have all this money, which is tax exempt, which is coming in, which they then use to organize political demonstrations, pay for politicians, mostly the far right, and tear down Mr. Jefferson's wall between religion and the state. And they've done a pretty good job of clawing at it. So, if I were in charge of affairs, I would certainly tax every religion in the country on their portfolio and their income.
I'm just going to make a comment because the question was about religion in the world, and I totally agree with Gore's analysis of religion in the United States. It's worth remembering that in many parts of the world, religion becomes an organizing principle against the United States. And in many ways, the rise of fundamentalism, and not just Islamic fundamentalism, but also Hindu fundamentalism, for example, in India, becomes an expression of protest of things that people see as the imposition of American values and American capitalism. And there is this sort of wonderful contradiction that religion is both the fueling factor behind the right in the United States and often the fueling factor behind opposition to the United States outside this country.